Truth is always stranger than fiction. This is Stranger Than Fiction with Robert Homrich.
Hello everyone and welcome to the strangest hour on the internet, Stranger Than Fiction. I'm your host Robert Homrich, and I just want to send a quick thank you to Catalystmic for putting together that intro music you just heard. So I'm really looking forward to this week's show because we have a special guest here today who is nothing short of a legend. He's been on the forefront of conspiracy theory for nearly 2 decades. He's an internationally known award-winning TV producer, filmmaker, radio talk show host, and lecturer. He's considered an expert in the fields of the occult, trauma-based mind control, Illuminati symbolism, and ancient civilizations. He's lectured extensively on the secret signs of symbolism of Freemasonry, the ancient astronaut hypothesis, trauma-based mind control, social engineering, government conspiracy, human cloning, technologies of the future, synchronicity, and the list goes on and on. He's been on HBO, Discovery Channel. You've seen him in the studio with Alex Jones, and he's been the guest on countless radio shows. But you probably know him best from his conspiracy films or as the host of the Free Zone or the Freeman Perspective, or perhaps you just know him as basically an internet legend when it comes to the world of occult and conspiracy theories. It is both a privilege and a pleasure to welcome Freeman Fly to the show. Freeman, welcome.
Thank you, Rob.
So,
I feel like a true legend now.
Well, don't sell yourself short. So why don't we start by we're going to get into Freemasonry quite heavily in this show. So why don't we just start out? Give us a little bit of background on, if you would, of your family's connections to Freemasonry.
Yeah. What an interesting thing that really is, because it really brings together the split that has occurred from pre-World Wide Web to post-World Wide Web, and how much we think we know. So, honestly, I lived with a Freemason for 25 years and never knew it. But the truth is that my dad actually left Freemasonry before I was born, so this may play a role in it, but I'm not sure because I've met a lot of people, and it's really intriguing, Rob, to find that each of the people that get into this knowledge, especially back in the day when it wasn't so disseminated,
yes,
they found that their family had connections. And it was pretty much the same for me. I was truly intrigued by, the mysteries of planet Earth, the Great Pyramid, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster. These were things I was reading about when I was 10 years old. And UFOs and abductions and all of that. These were things that I was truly into, reading Time Life books, or whatever they were back in the day, giants and little people and all of that. So I was already well into the knowledge of these mysteries, not knowing that my family was involved in them. And I found this to be the case with every person that has gotten into my work back in the early days, because before me, there wasn't much talk about Freemasons. You didn't regularly hear about it on fringe shows like Coast to Coast. Maybe Bill Cooper, you would get a little bit about that in his stories. And, back then we were passing cassette tapes to one another. Here's Bill Cooper's latest. Oh, here's the latest Artel. I still have some of those cassettes in my box. So what I'm getting to here is just kind of the idea that there was a time in my life before the World Wide Web when no one knew anything. And this is where I was at. So by college, I was in an honors course called Interdisciplinary Studies. And this college course outlined and took care of all your required courses. It was the only course you had to take except for, the outside things. So here I am in IDS, Interdisciplinary Studies, this honors course. I was a homeless kid that was given a free ride to the college, and was graduating with A's and honors, and in a special course that was basically conducted by the social engineers of our time, the Club of Rome, and all of that. And I was pretty much given this relationship of Nietzsche versus Star Trek, and this was my college.
Mm-hmm.
So in this course, I met this character who I call Alistair Morrison, because he was basically Aleister Crowley meets Jim Morrison. This guy was deep into the occult, but none of us knew what that was. None of us knew what that meant. He had a massive magician's library encompassing Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley, and he had all of the ancient equinox writings of Crowley, and all of this stuff. And he became one of my best friends. We actually kind of started a rock band together, right? And I'm a late bloomer. 25 years I'm in college, right? So when I left high school, I just took off on the road, and then I got bored with that and went to college. And was given a free ride, a free apartment, and they paid for my books and everything. So it was all just grand. But in this course, this character, Alistair Morrison, showed me some of the esoteric work. And I remember the whole class was circling around this, or at least a group of us. And he said the word esoteric. And we said, what does that mean? None of us had ever heard that word before. And these are honor students in college, okay? And he's like, well, it means you don't know what it means. And we all giggled, like, what is this character? Who is this guy? But he flips to a page, and there I see the Masonic compass, square, and G. And I'm like, wait a minute. I recognize this logo. And my friend's like, what do you mean? And I say, well, you know what? My dad has these cufflinks in his top drawer, and I would wear them when I played Battlestar Galactica as a kid. And so when I was Apollo racing around in my Viper, I had my Masonic regalia on to denote my place of this. This was when I'm 10 years old in the 70s, sure, when Battlestar Galactica came out. Right? So he says, well, your dad's a Freemason. And I know my dad's not a Freemason. From what you're showing me here, my dad's not into any of that at all. And but I did know that my dad built nuclear missiles. This was his job, and he was. Well, other things that I knew were that my dad was on Killer Submarine with Jimmy Carter, like the first killer sub, and Jimmy Carter in charge. I got pictures of my dad and Jimmy in their Navy outfits on the submarine and stuff. But then I ended up with pictures of my father getting raised to Master Mason in the lodge, and I have these as well. So I learned of this thing, Freemasonry. Now, there's no Dan Brown, there's no Nicolas Cage in National Treasure, there's no promotion. Nobody knows about these guys.
Sure.
And I go ask my dad, hey, are you a Freemason? And he says, well, yes. Well, I was. And I kind of got this story where my mom was married to what she called the Grand Potentate of Freemasonry in Kaiserslautern. Yeah, this is in Europe. Mm-hmm. My mom's grew up in World War II France, being bombed on both sides, hunted by Nazis and stuff, things like that. That's my mom's. Growing up, she would find body parts of people on the streets. This really affected me in a way, too, to know that war happened. As most Americans, they don't have these types of stories.
Right.
Fucking body parts and stuff. But, so it turns out that my mom was married to this quote-unquote Grand Potentate of Freemasonry, I guess a high pontiff in the order or something. And this was the man that raised my father to Master Mason. Now, that means he was the worshipful master in the lodge that presided over the ritual that brought my dad to the third degree. We can get deeper into that later. But my dad fell in love with my mom, and she was married to this potentate. He agreed to let my mom go and marry my dad. But within Masonic tradition, one worshipful master cannot take another worshipful master's wife and stay within the order. So my dad actually, as far as I can tell, had to leave Freemasonry in order to marry my mom.
Interesting.
So by the time I was born, he was no longer a Freemason and not going to lodges, not doing rituals or things of that nature. So that's kind of the basis of how I discovered my roots in
Okay, very very interesting. It's like it's a love story. Who would have thunk it in Freemasonry? um, so why don't you give us a little bit of if we can move along into what got you started with like your show in Austin and just got you falling down the rabbit hole deeper. If you would kind of tell us that story a little bit more.
Yeah, well, okay. This all gets really strange, too, and it goes all the way back to 1998. Because I had discovered something in this, and when I began my interest in Freemasonry, I studied their rituals in depth. I got all the ritual books I could. I read Morals and Dogma, and then I read the glossary to Morals and Dogma, filed by the Supreme Council. I read every book outside of that, Born in Blood, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and really started to get a deeper knowledge of this. And I came across one bizarre book called Mahabone. And you probably won't find this book, but you can find it as another title, The Master's Carpet. But Mahabone was a book published in the 1800s that outlined all of the Masonic rituals. The guy had actually written, his name is Rowane, he had actually written all of the rituals for Masonry, or outlined them for, people, the handbook to the rituals of Freemasonry, which then outlined all the key grips or handshakes and passwords and everything you want to know about Masonic ritual is in these books that you can now get on Amazon if you want. But then he wrote a second book, which is attached to this book, and it's the reason it's titled Mahabone, and that is because Mahabone is the most secret word of a Freemason, and it was the ultimate slap in the face for him to title his book The Most Secret Word, the lost word of Freemasons, which no one honestly knows what it means, even the Masons themselves. So Mahabone then outlined Freemasonry as ball worship, and he got very deep into how each of these signs and symbols represented ball and ball worship, and basically he classified Freemasonry as devil worship.
Sure.
So it became this thing to me that I started, and I guess this doesn't play into anything that I'm about to say, but I'm kind of giving you the outline that I grew up through. And again, this is pre-World Wide Web, so you had to learn of a topic and then go discover the works on that topic, and then use the index in that book to find more in the other books. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like you had to go read Microfiche, you had to do all that.
Sure. One rabbit hole always leads to the next.
Right. Exactly. You're like, what is he saying? Who's this person? A lifeless Levi? And you're off on a whole other tangent. But so the television show, well, it's a long process to get there, and it's relevant though. I'm trying to figure out where to begin this story because it starts with Y2K.
Sure.
And I'm trying to remember chronologically how this fell together because I can't remember whether the impeachment of Clinton became before Y2K or after Y2K. Because it was the impeachment of Bill Clinton that gave me the knowledge to predict the presidents for the next, from Bill Clinton to Donald Trump,
or
at least their aspects.
Sure, why don't you just go into detail about that? As far as I'm concerned, the timeline, the chronology isn't really as important as the message or the content or the context of what you're talking about. So,
right. All right, well, let me just state that the most common complaint that I hear about my broadcast is that I say I too much. And, I actually did a whole summer of trying to not say I, and it is a very difficult thing to do.
Sure.
But when I'm telling these stories, it's not in trying to boast that I did this or I predicted this. None of that matters to me. What matters is you learn my method, because I don't want to have to be doing this. I want you to have the method correct so that you understand where I came from, and then you can go further with it, you see? I've been working on this 25 years,
Well, just so you know,
I'm going to tell you the story. I just thought I needed to preempt because I'm going to say I a lot.
Sure, and that I was just going to say that's totally excusable because you're the guest on my show. This show is about you, so I would totally expect you to use that word at least a couple times. So don't feel bashful. This show is about you, so don't. It might seem weird. It seems weird when I do that as well, but nothing wrong with it, putting a little emphasis on you because that's what we're here to talk about. So go ahead and carry on.
Well, another big point I'm trying to get across here is how young this science is. You know, people run around now talking about Illuminati signs and symbols everywhere. People are making a living out of it, where I'm not. And, you know, they don't realize that here I am. I'm not saying, hey, look, I'm the guy who created this, only listen to me. I'm saying, look how young this science is. Don't think you know everything yet.
Sure.
Because you need to learn. You know, there's a lot of layers to this puzzle, and Freemasonry is not the answer. Illuminati doesn't even exist any longer. You know, you're using this term. So the reason that I state that I did these things, for one reason, is to say, look how young this science is. It's brand new. You know, me, David Icke, 1998, we're just starting this thing. You know, Bill Cooper laid the groundwork. Coast to Coast, they skirted the subject, and I've honestly been banned from Coast to Coast for the last 20 years. So there's a reason. You know, they won't allow me on their radio program. They won't. I've met with them. I've met with their producers, and they will not allow me on. So
we're definitely going to have to dig
that.
in. We're definitely going to have to dig into that one a little bit as to what that reason might be. Do you have any indication?
You know, there are many levels. I don't. I've even spoken with the host of Coast to Coast, and I'm not talking about George Noria, who I've also met with him and his producers on a number of occasions. And at moments in critical in history where this information would have really made an impact. You know, at the moment that the things were occurring were the moments that I was trying to get it out. Sure. And Coast to Coast just, they don't return, even their host couldn't get me on.
See, so, I can relate. I've had the same aspirations with them and the same results that you have with Coast to Coast. It seems like they're kind of stuck on just a couple specific agendas. One of them being aliens, the other being time travel. Of course, we know Nori's a big fan of that. As what I am as well. But anyway, I can definitely relate to your difficulties there. Anyway, I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, it's a bizarre thing to me. I mean, I thought Obama cloning was the most exciting story to date in the conspiracy field, but it didn't take off the way that I had anticipated. But you know, that's another story.
Sure,
so
but
back
it's an interesting one.
It is. It's very interesting, and you know, if you want me to just throw in a bullet point of that, I stated nothing more than what the very first bioethical committee stated. Because the first medical bioethics committee to ever gather, their main question, and you can go look this out, the main question for the very first bioethics committee for medical industry was, what do we do when we clone Akhenaten? And this was a very legitimate question asked by a collection of doctors to figure out what's happening right now. And, of course, that bioethics committee was way back in the 90s, maybe even earlier. I'd have to go look that info up again to get the dates. But you see, here is a collection of doctors stating the very same thing, decades before I did. And I was simply reiterating them by also showing that I think it happened. And children can take my work, and have, and they've written me. They've taken my work on Barack Obama being a clone, along with the rest of the family. That's what makes it really important.
That's what I find interesting is the parallels aren't just limited to him. It's with with Michelle as well, and the kids. I mean, it's like it's like not like they just limited their cloning to Akhenaten himself, but they kind of brought his whole family back, and the similarities
are
uncanny. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be true. But I'm not one of those type of people that says that this is what is, unless I have Barack Obama's DNA, And the moment I have Barack Obama's DNA, then that's the moment I'm going to say this is all true. But I will say the evidence clearly suggests that this is most possible and probable. That this is, if they were going to bring back anybody, it'd be Akhenaten, and even the doctors, bioethics, the ethics agree. Manly P. Hall agrees. The Masons agree. You know, if anyone could come back, they would make it Akhenaten. And I always thought Akhenaten was common knowledge. You know, everybody knows King Tut. So as a kid, I studied King Tut and Akhenaten in depth because he's like the go-to guy for the ancient astronauts hypothesis. The cone head, wide hips, and all of that. And his mysterious religion of the sun that suddenly seemed to take over and then become another religion, which we probably call Christianity. You know, he's a very important person. So you would think that just on the merits of the science, the probability, and the possibility of this, that Coast to Coast would want to have this, you know, investigated on their program because it's, you know, it's something that a child and children have taken to the classroom and proven as a solid hypothesis and gotten A's on their reports. They send them to me. It's amazing. It's awesome. It's great. Yes. Because, you know, truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
that's the theme of the show here.
You know, everything... Go ahead.
I was just saying that's our theme here, stranger than fiction. So
that's right.
So anyway, why don't we shift back to Clinton and try and keep it on track because we only have an hour here and we got a lot of other stuff I definitely want to cover. Some of your other earlier works too, like was you predicted 9/11. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Right, and all of that plays into this story.
Okay.
And again, you know, not to say I predicted 9/11. You know, this is not my goal. Sure. to shine the light on me saying I'm the ultimate. My goal is to teach you my method and the things that led me to say, hey, there's going to be a major terrorist attack on 9/11. You know, because if you know this, then you've got more foundation to stand on. It doesn't matter. I'm just the messenger. Don't shoot me, all right? You know? So it began with Bill Clinton. And when I saw him be brought before the world and his face turned purple as they announced that he had inserted a cigar into his secretary, Monica Lewinsky. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, in my entire history of growing up, and I grew up in the space age, and, you know, Nixon and Reagan, and, you know, they did not talk about a president inserting cigars into his secretary on national television and worldwide television.
That's the kind of thing they would usually tend to want to cover up, and that's why we have the Secret Service. So it's interesting. I'm sure that's ringing alarm bells in your head. Like, why are they doing the opposite of what they normally do here?
Yeah. Immediately, I'm like, this is horrible for national security. You know, this is not something that, and you don't put him on the stage and have his face turning purple and him constantly going, can I have another bathroom break, please? You know, now I got no love for the Clintons, right? Like, I was heavily into watching Waco. I met many of the people involved in Waco. I know who the officers were that were shot at Waco, who were shot by their own people. You can watch the video, you know, so I know about the Clintons' body count. I know about the Clintons' cocaine dealings in Mena, Arkansas. You know, I have no love of these witches at all.
Definitely no Boy Scouts.
It wasn't like I was feeling sorry for the guy.
Right.
But strategically, because I have a very strategic mind that sees these patterns, I'm like, wait a minute, there's a strategy here that doesn't fit. And so what would they do with this? So I looked at this puzzle, and I said, okay, they're diminishing this man. They had already diminished the ideal of the president by sticking him on David Letterman and having him play his saxophone. You know, already now he's just one of the guys. You know what I mean? He's not this statist or this, you know, something that you would haul up. He's just another character on David Letterman. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So these type of things, these character developments of presidents had never happened before. Right?
Sure.
I mean, imagine Nixon on David Letterman. You know,
right.
What's going to happen? You know what I mean? So they had turned this president into a man of the people, just a common an old guy, and now they're taking him down for something that nobody really cares about, an extramarital affair. I mean, Hillary's a witch. I mean, come on. You know, of course, she's probably a lesbian. You know, he needs someone. And anyway, so this was social engineering in my book. So I saw this puzzle. I said, okay, what's next then? Well, they need to force the president into office next. This would then start to destroy the ideal of the system itself, of election fraud.
Sure.
So during the Bill Clinton era, they kept trying to create this thing called Homeland Security. Now, no one would vote for Homeland Security. It came up to bill every October during the Clinton era, 8 years or 4 years somewhere. 4 years I was watching it, right? Mm-hmm. They had Governor Tom Ridge, as head of Homeland Security already, but there was no Homeland Security Department. They could not get the House and the Congress to agree to have this most nefarious, Homeland Security, right?
I see where you're going with this. The Masonic slogan "Ordo ab Chaos" comes to mind. Is that an accurate depiction of what we're getting with this? Order from chaos.
I guess I don't know. I mean, that's going to sidetrack.
Okay. My apologies.
Okay, so it's okay. I mean, yeah, there was the whole Hegelian dialectic, but I didn't know that word. Problem, reaction, solution hadn't come out of Dave Dyke's mouth yet.
Sure.
I just saw a pattern that might unfold. I didn't know I was correct. I just was like, okay, well, it's this, then that, right? I'm kind of like a computer in that way.
You look at the bigger picture, so, you see everything at play, and there's always a motive, for sure.
Well, I've been consistently shocked each time I was correct. It's not like I'm running around telling everybody I'm right. I'm completely flabbergasted every single time, but I've been right all the way up to Trump. So it's obvious that my method needs to be thought about. Okay, so quickly. So here they are trying to create Homeland Security. It comes up every October. Everybody says, "Oh my God, that's the most unconstitutional thing that I've ever seen." No way in hell. Tom Ridge is already the head of a department that does not exist, right? So obviously they're going to make it happen, just like they already had SpaceX astronauts working with NASA before they shut down.
Funny how they automatically already had the paperwork and the bill already ready to go. I mean, they always
yeah, and then when it was after 9/11, it was like it was a brand new thing, and I'm like, wait a minute, we've been talking about this since early mid 90s. This is not a new thing. This is just now you're going to agree to it.
Right.
So when I saw that they had taken down the man of the people, Bill Clinton, over an extramarital affair, even mentioned or the acts that he did, I said that the next thing they will do was force the president into office so that we lose faith in the system, because this whole thing is about bringing down America. But the problem is that if you're an elite group trying to bring down a nation, you must do it in a way that it seems organic and in a way that the people believe the right historical content to create it. So basically, the goal here is to make people believe that freedom leads to tyranny. That's what you got to believe. So that's the goal. So now, I say they're going to force the president into office. At this time, I'm also deciphering the corporate logos. And I started with the gas stations and immediately saw all of the representations of Freemasonry in the corporate logo. It was a pattern that I had recognized through studying their rituals and then studying the signs and symbols that then applied to each of the corporate logos. So in an example, you got Texaco and you got Shell. You got a pentagram with a Tau cross and you got a shell. Now, these just seem, why would they use these things? And only once you've taken them all in and they all fit the same science, which is based on Freemasonic ritual, which is based on Kabbalah, then you can understand the signs and symbols that you're seeing. So it's actually the star and the shell are symbols of Venus. And this goes back to our goddess Columbia, and it's why our capital is the District of Columbia, and why there's a pentagram in the street plans of D.C. So if you were to go to the World War II Memorial in Austin, Texas, you'll see our goddess there standing as Columbia it says so proudly on it, established in 1933, this particular statue, which is right next to where Crowley's Book of the Laws house. On one side of her is a shell, the other side is a pentagram. Again, these are the symbols. 1933, this was put up of the goddess Columbia, which is a Freemasonic goddess thing that comes up through Britannia. The Freemasons established Britannia, and she's basically the same. And it goes back down through the line through Minerva, who the Illuminati worshipped, through all the way back to Isis and Semiramis. And each time you will find that this goddess is depicted with an owl, as Demeter, as Minerva, and of course the Illuminati, Fatim Weishaupt, their main depiction was an owl. That was their main symbol. The Illuminati never used an eye in the pyramid symbol. That wasn't their symbol. They were Minerval. They worshipped the goddess Minerva, and their symbol was an owl.
Yes.
So when people start throwing around the eye in the pyramid as Illuminati logo, no, it's a Freemason logo. And the story of how that Freemason logo got on your dollar bill and how it ended up on the back of the seal is a really intriguing tale to be studied. And Manly P. Hall would be your best source. I would recommend reading The Secret Destiny of America.
And not to discredit Manly Hall by any means, because I love his work, but I wrote about that as well in my book, and then the book about DC, about how the whole seal came to be, because that's very interesting, and that symbolism certainly speaks to us all on levels that I don't think we really can perceive consciously. But yeah, that's definitely a subject any American should definitely look into. I totally agree with that. Anyway.
Look into Nicholas Roerich.
Yep, he's another one.
And The Invincible. Find the secret cult of Nicholas Roerich, and then you'll understand why the pyramid is on the dollar bill.
Sure.
And the mystery of Nicholas Roerich. And of course, I have all his paintings and film of his work on FreemanTV.com. So yeah, I made it my job to go to each and every one of these Masonic orders and secret societies like the OTO and the Rosicrucians and the Golden Dawn, and meet with these people and take pictures from inside of all of the lodges, so that, because these things didn't exist yet. There was no World Wide Web. There was no Google image search. It didn't exist. When I was doing my corporate logos television show, I had to drive around Austin, Texas, and take pictures of the corporate logo. You got to recognize the difference of pre-World Wide Web research to post-World Wide Web research. It's a different monster.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Knowledge was hard-won back then. It took me 25 years to teach you what I taught you in 3 television shows.
Right.
Right. So as I was discovering these corporate logos, of course, I got to Phillips 66. And then, I'm dealing with Prince Philip. We know he's amazing. We know he's involved. And what was 66? I had Highway 66 and, Route 66. And this one, since I had defined a very rigid science for deciphering the logos, my science was applied Kabbalism, because Albert Pike said that Freemasonry is based in Kabbalism over 70 times in Morals and Dogma. So, he made that pretty clear. So I when I got to Phillips 66, I just grabbed the Magician's Dictionary, right, off my bookshelf. I have a huge reference library for hand signs, gestures, all of this stuff. And I pulled out the Magician's Dictionary, and I looked up 66, as simple as that. And it said that this was the number of the great work, or of the Qliphoth. And however you say that in Kabbalism, it's a Qliphoth, Quillipoth, it's a weird word that is Hebrew, and then it deals with Kabbalah. But what the Qliphoth is the abyss, the fallen angels, the place where chromosomes live. And so you have to have a working knowledge of the tree of life, of what they mean by this in Kabbalah, and then how the numerological, astronomical, and tarot relate to this tree of life. And so 66 puts itself in the hidden point on the tree of life, which is known as the abyss. The Masonic compass and square sits around a G. Many people have tried to decipher what that G means. Geometry, because they're a stonemasons guild. God, because they believe in a higher power. Or even the generative power of sex.
Yep.
But see, none of those agree with the initial science necessary, which is Freemasonic ritual / Kabbalah. So G in Kabbalah is the path straight up the middle pillar. It is the most direct path from earth to heaven. But in order to take that direct path of the G path, you must cross the abyss.
Yes.
And in that, you will lose your mind. As Crowley stated, as Ken Grant stated, as anyone that has dealt with the abyss has stated, that it is the most dangerous path to take the straight path from heaven.
And that would be the Sephiro known as Doth on the
Doth,
tree,
exactly.
or knowledge, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So that is the meaning of the number 66. And so all of a sudden, now I'm looking at the Phillips 66 logo, and I noticed that it has 6 points on its crest, which holds the 66 inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I got 6 points with the 66, and I'm looking at 666 on, Prince Phillips 66 gas station. Well, this then, when you take the number 6 and you apply it to Hebrew, the number 6 in Hebrew is V. Not like Roman numerals in Hebrew, 6 is V, not 5. Right? Mm-hmm. So when you apply VV, now I'm looking at the Volkswagen logo. And I'm recognizing, and I already know that Hitler was deep into the occult, carried around Madame Blavatsky's books, used it to define his very idea of root races and the extermination of Jewish people and such. And he also disbarred and disbanded every Freemasonic order inside of Germany at that time. He dispelled every wizard that could oppose him, basically. And when you look, he was like, he was the man of the people, Hitler. He was saying, well, I'm going to give everyone a car. And he created, his force created Volkswagen, this car of the people that anyone could own, everybody could have. And you look at the Volkswagen logo, again, Hitler was utilizing the same magical practices and same ideas. So when you see the Volkswagen logo, you clearly see that it's not 3 V's, but it's 2 V's interlaced. So now you're back to the 66, the path over the abyss, or the abyss itself, the place where the insane live, the place where the fallen angels rise, the place where Coronazon or Leviathan lives, or Cthulhu, however you want to look at it. And so you have that VV symbol of the Volkswagen, but then it makes 3 V's because it's interlaced. So now you're to 666 on the Volkswagen logo by Hebrew, Kabbalah, and Freemasonic standards. Well, so next thing I know, I hear the rumblings, W Bush. Now, of course, I knew of Pappy Bush, HW, which means Emperor of the Fallen Angels. H is the letter of the Emperor in the Tarot. And, of course, Pappy Bush being Skull and Bones, we know that he was ritually brought up through all of this and did, weird rituals and coffins and screams and sexual encounters and such. And we know that his son, George W. Bush, was also selected for such wonderful treatment as the Skull and Bones presents in their tomb, which then creates the CIA, right?
And so now we have the prop to thrust into office that you were mentioning earlier.
Right, and I had said that they would force this person into office, and they would make it obvious, because it was your reaction that was necessary. It was you. It was the goal was to make you aware of voter fraud.
And if I can just jump in here for 1 second. Now, when people who are listening are watching Donald Trump, I want you to think about what he's saying here, and think about how he.
Well, wait till I get to Trump.
Sure.
Wait till I get to these debates.
Okay, please do. Go ahead and carry on.
Yeah, because it plays right up to it, and no one was more astounded than me when I finally ring the bell on this story for you. You're going to be like, oh my God, I've Okay, so I said they needed to force president and make it obvious, so they did. They made it obvious. Oh, the court case by Jeb Bush in Florida, forced the president to office. Voter fraud, voter fraud, voter fraud. Right? So now we have sexually molesting presidents with voter fraud, okay, from Bill Clinton to W. Once they forced W into office and he was carrying the title of the beast, the W, I said this will be the year they force the Homeland Security into action. So that all through from 98 on, I had been saying there's going to be a major terrorist attack in the middle of September because it needs to fall in time for public reaction so that when the Homeland Security bill comes back in October, everybody votes for it, right? So all through the Clinton era, I was saying there's going to be a major terrorist attack in the middle of September. Now, once I discovered the Pappy Bush HW connection and I discovered the W and all of this, I then started looking back more at numbers and understanding. And it turns out that the OTO, the Typhonian tradition, Typhon is also another name for Leviathan and Herodoton and the things that live in the abyss. The Typhonian tradition of the Ordo Templi Orientis, who claim to be the Illuminati, if you don't know these things, then don't use the term Illuminati, you know what I mean? The OTO, they claim to be the Illuminati in its present form. And this is, of course, the, Aleister Crowley, sex magic, bizarre things that many Freemasons belong to. But the Typhonian tradition of the OTO is yet another subset of this that deals strictly with the abyss and with communication with extraterrestrials through ritual magic. They have whole chapters on the numbers 9 and 11. These were very important in the Luciferian belief system and in dealing with the abyss. And so when I saw H.W. had given his New World Order speech on 9/11/1990, this triggered me to focus on those numbers, 9/11. And had I known more, I would have also predicted the target. Now, no one can prove this today, and if you can, please do, that the cornerstones of the Twin Towers were Masonically laid on 9/11 in the 70s. The date on the Twin Towers cornerstone was 9/11, 1974, I think, I don't remember. Okay, I saw it myself, but now I didn't take a picture. I don't have the picture, and there's no history on that cornerstone that I can find. So if anyone has any knowledge of the cornerstone of the Twin Towers, it's there. But the Pentagon, its Masonically laid cornerstone, still stands. And you can see clearly it's dated to 9/11, 1940-something. You can go see that one. So I was focused on the numbers, the magic, the Kabbalah, and the Typhonian tradition of the abyss. So had I known that the cornerstones of those two buildings were dated to 9/11, I would have said, hey, it's probably going to be this building or that building. But I didn't know these. But what I did know is that 9/11 was an important number to this Luciferian cabal, and they needed a terrorist attack in the middle of September. So I re-updated my projection, and I said, it's going to happen on 9/11. So the week before 9/11, I got at a party, and I didn't know about drones. I didn't know there was such a thing. This was still the time of access television. Again, the internet was primal. It was AOL chat rooms. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I announced at this party, hey, there's going to be a major terrorist attack on 9/11. Don't freak out. This is all for your reaction. And then on 9/11, I had no idea that it was 9/11. I didn't have a calendar. I didn't have a television. I was sleeping in some hippie's house. And a dozen people stormed the door to demand how I knew that this had happened. Now, what was a shock to me as the theorist, well, first was that I was right, right? And it took me a week to actually see the Twin Towers get hit. I didn't have television. I had to go find a way to see the event. It had no impact on me whatsoever. The only thing that had impact on me was the people at my door screaming at me. They were mad, and I didn't understand that reaction at all. But what freaked me out was that two of them in that line already had their bills folded like the Twin Towers. Now, this seems beyond imaginable.
Right.
And no one else is going to know that this is true. But from a conspiracy theorist point of view, to have people that had no knowledge of this situation to already have a bill folded in such a unique way that it depicted, this was the $20 bill, the new one that was crafted in 1996. They knew how to fold it already to make the Twin Towers. Now, me, I'm like, well, how the hell did you know that?
Right.
And they were like, oh, it was all over the internet. So this showed me they wanted you to know.
Right.
They wanted you to put this whole thing together and make a big show of it. They wanted you to know that passport fell out unburned to the ground. They wanted you to know that Building 7 was, brought down by demolition.
Sure.
They wanted you to know.
That's why we see the news reports of the third building collapsing before it collapsed. I mean, they were intentionally sloppy. I think that if you look at that with discerning eyes, I think that's obvious to anybody who does so.
Exactly. Social engineering, splitting the country right down the middle, right there.
Sure.
Alex Jones becomes the biggest thing, which I predicted as well. Once I learned of him and spoke to him. The first words I said to Alex Jones was, so I hear you predicted 9/11 to the day. And he said, well, not to the day. And I was like, Those were my first words to Alex when we met at Access Studios. This was before YouTube, before Google, before all that crap. Man, we were on Access Television together, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, all of a sudden I was correct again, right? And I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, this is insane. What the hell is going on here? So I say, okay, when I said W would be forced into office, since they were going to destroy the system by doing that, by bringing people's attention to voter fraud and the fact that there's stuff going on inside that nobody knows, the next thing would be to destroy the Constitution, or the faith in the Constitution.
Sure.
Well, how do you do that? You bring in a non-American president. You bring in a president that has no natural born status. And I said that, and it's on my website, before Obama, because finally the World Wide Web had become a thing, and I could actually lay things down for people and have them timestamped so that you can see, hey, I did this, you know what I mean? Right. But it's not, again, an ego thing that I say I did this. It's so that you know how it was done and how
it's about validity.
The understanding of this.
It's about lending validity and credibility, not about, exactly.
Yeah, I want you to know the method, and, I just happen to be the guy who came up with it, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So, anyway, I'm trying to race through this, Rob, I really am.
No, by all means, we'll cover what we need to cover. If we go over time, we're going to go over time. We got some important issues to discuss, but I feel like in order to get to that point, we got to get through all of this stuff that we're kind of running through. So go ahead and continue.
Exactly. Okay, so the point of this was that when W was forced into office, I said the next president will not have he'll be a non-natural born citizen. Or I think I put it kind of artistically and said Bush will be the last American president.
Okay.
And I still don't really consider Trump an American president. I consider him a globalist.
Sure.
So I think it still stands true, but what I really meant was that the next president would have his legitimacy questioned, because that would be the next thing in the social engineering. And so when Orly Tate comes and hits the scene as the main whistleblower and lawyer to have the president show his birth certificate, I was like, oh my God, for real?
Yeah.
Now, Orly Tates is a lady who can barely speak English, has a very heavy accent, and she's very hard to understand. And yet this was the person that was placed in charge of bringing the president to justice, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously they didn't want this to work. They just wanted everybody to know, because you were supposed to know. And that's what I keep trying to say, is these are all conspiracies within the conspiracy. You're not being brave by realizing that the president's birth certificate is a fraud. You're actually filling the plan.
Right.
If you're the one running around saying the president is not viable president.
They want you to know these things for sure.
Yeah. But, then came in my whole Obama clone thing, right?
Sure.
Which doesn't play into this story at all. The fact that he's Akhenaten would play a different story than one I'm telling right now.
Right.
So that doesn't play into the story at this point. We're looking at the social engineering of the destruction of America, what I titled the satanification of America. And what I really meant by that was making America the adversary, the Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're doing with the honey boo boo effect of, projecting this horrific America over to the rest of the world. And meanwhile, we're screaming, release the memo, right? Destroying ourselves from within, making ourselves the adversary to every other nation. And the people are doing it. All the magicians are doing is laying out the culture for it.
Sure.
That's all they ever do.
And it's brilliantly
you
diabolical.
Do all the work.
It's brilliantly diabolical.
Mm-hmm.
So now
okay,
we've got a clone in office who was thrust in there. He's not and you're right. It's all by design to just get people to disillusion them and get them to lose faith in that pesky little thing that's been a problem for these rule makers, if you will, the Constitution. And so
us damn renegades.
and now we're kind of we're turning up the volume on that with Trump at this point. So
okay, here's the bell. Here's the bell ringer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I outlined for you first the idea that the president's a rapist pedophile, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe not a pedophile, but at least a sexual deviant, right?
Sure.
And that there's voter fraud, and then Obama's birth certificate and the idea of non-natural born state people, right? Presidents. So next thing we know, Hillary and Donald Trump are in a debate. Their very first debate, right?
Yep.
And it's all a big show, and it's really creepy to watch Trump follow Hillary around, and a lot of really weird stuff went on. But first thing they do, they bring the 4 sexually assaulted women on stage, right? From Bill Clinton. Like, how did this play into the Trump-Hillary debate? Don't know, but it's exactly the first point that I made to you, right? So it re-emphasized that whole situation. They literally brought all the women up there,
Mm-hmm.
Then they got into voter fraud. And, Trump, it's rigged, right? So right there with W, again, same social engineering. Then Trump stands there. They interviewed Trump during this debate on at least 15 minutes of the 35-minute debate was dedicated to Barack Obama's birth certificate. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, what place does Barack Obama's birth certificate have in a Hillary-Trump debate?
Sure, he's done. We're done with him. But we're not done with his purpose. So we're going to rub that in your face just to pull out all the stops and make, kind of... It's obvious there. It's all there to get us riled up, to get the reaction, like you said.
And there's Trump saying it was me. I made Obama present his birth certificate, which came out as an open PDF or an open Photoshop document, which wasn't flattened. Like any amateur, an amateur would flatten the Photoshop document. Especially if you tried to forge something.
Sure. But
no, they left it as segments. So I still have that. I still have it, along with Anna Nicole's autopsy report. I still have these things. It's a Photoshop document that you can move the images and names and everything around on. So they wanted you to know.
Yep.
And so this has been my biggest point for the last 18 years, is trying to say, and then when I saw it in the debates, and we did it in the second debate as well, same thing. None of the debates had anything to do with Hillary and Trump. They all had to do with the social engineering I just outlined for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so there it is, from beginning to end.
And it's interesting. I've been saying it along with you. Probably not quite as long and probably not quite as loudly as you, but I've been saying this all along as well. It's a controlled burn of America, and that's what we're witnessing here with all these events and the roles being filled by the puppet masters. It's like I said earlier, it's ordo ab chaos, or order from chaos. Problem, reaction, solution, and
that's what you should think when you're hashtagging release the memo. You should realize that you're the chaos.
yes, and we're feeding the fire, absolutely. So one of the things we discussed before you came on was the Enough's Enough movement or initiative or whatever in Freemasonry, and you had told me that you felt like you might be somehow responsible. Can you go into that a bit?
Yeah.
What's that?
Poor Masons. Those poor Masons.
Right.
Well, I do feel a little guilty, right? Because I did come up with this concept of what we now call Illuminati logo.
Before we get too far in that, why don't we just kind of really give the people listening a rundown of what we're referring to with the Enough's Enough campaign and the Freemasonic standpoint on that, if you could.
Okay. Well, like I was telling you before, Freemason wasn't a word that was really tossed around until the World Wide Web and Dan Brown, came to be.
Sure.
Very, very few people knew of that organization or their influence. So what has occurred is in Westminster in London. Now, the very first Grand Lodge of Freemasonry was established there in 1770. And many people believe that the Scottish Rite version of Freemasonry are the ones that we consider these elitists, or what we call Illuminati. There are two factions within Freemasonry. You've got the Blue Lodge, or the York Rite, which is the first 3 degrees. But those are all the degrees that make the Scottish Rite is a weird conglomeration that attached itself to Freemasonry. Bases itself on the first 3 rituals, but then goes up to the 33 rituals that most people are aware of.
Mm-hmm.
But you must realize these are 2 separate things, really, because the York Rite, once you're a 3rd degree, once you're a Master Mason, that's it. You're a Master Mason. That's all there is to it. There's no more higher degrees. You can't be a high degree Mason. But then within the Scottish Rite, these 33 degrees outlined by Albert Pike and Philippus Levi, because Pike uses Levi a lot. Yes. He's the guy who created that Baphomet image that everybody recognizes.
Right.
So they created this other Scottish Rite, and it seems that the Scottish Rite is dominating over the York Rite, and it's taking all their money. I've interviewed many Masons on this, and even they agree that if we had something that was like what people describe the Illuminati, it would be the Scottish Rite Mason.
Mm-hmm.
But within the Masonic order, there are orders within orders you won't even know.
Sure.
You could be in 12 different orders inside of the Mason Lodge, and no one would even know that these other orders exist. You get tapped, you get picked for these things.
Mm-hmm.
So what has happened is people started to really discover the influence that Freemasonry had over politics, and this is what happened just recently in England. And the Guardian and a few other newspapers began posting articles about how members of Freemasonry should have to identify themselves. Because there was a case in New York where a Mason was caught doing a heinous act and was let go because he was caught by a bunch of Masons. Mm-hmm. And you can even go back to the story of Jack the Ripper and find out that Jack the Ripper was never caught because he was a Freemason, and he left code words, the Jews, which was G-E-W-E-S, which stood for, in their Masonic ritual, Jabella, Jabellum, and Jabello. These are things that you would only know if you're inside a Masonic Lodge or studied it.
Sure, and that's the secret word that combines 3 different gods into one sort of. You did say Jabulon, Correct.
The ruffians. It's
Sure.
it's the ruffians that kill Hiram Abiff. You're doing a death and resurrection ritual inside of the lodge. You're playing the role of Hiram Abiff, and the ruffians are there to kill you.
Right.
And bury you under the acacia tree and then resurrect you to the light, where then you are given the most secret word of a Master Mason while on the 5 points of fellowship, which is like heel to heel, knee to knee, chest to chest, cheek to cheek, I don't remember,
Yes.
back to back, so like that, hand to back. And you're standing in this odd position, then you are able to receive this most secret word, which Roanes, the guy who wrote the book, Handbook of Freemasonry, outed and used as the title of his book, Mahabone.
Yep.
So that is the lost word, the most secret word of a Freemason, but even they don't know what it means. So, these newspapers started saying, hey, these Masons need to identify themselves because there's obvious conspiracies going on within this, and they're definitely holding too much power. And if you go through the Scottish Rite Grand Lodge, the Supreme Council there in Washington, D.C., of course you see Roy Rogers, you see Buzz Aldrin, you see all the presidents, you see over half the presidents of America belong to this Masonic order. I was in the Australia Grand Lodge in Australia and Sydney, and every prime minister was proudly displayed. And then you got all your police departments and judges.
Sure.
And if you were to go into a courtroom and put your hands over your head and say, will no one help this widow's son, or something to that effect,
Sure.
that is the grand hailing sign of distress of a Freemason, and the judge, knowing this, might just let you leave.
Yep.
And so now the Freemasons have come together, and at least those in Westminster, a couple of lodges where they found secret societies within their secret societies, and are saying, look, these guys need to identify themselves, especially if they're in positions of power or in the police or in the military. And of course, that's all of them.
Mm-hmm.
When you realize there's whole lodges, then you throw in the Odd Fellows if you want to see who has keeping all your bodies. The Odd Fellows are like the fools of Freemasonry. They take care of it. Anyway. So now Freemasons have come forward with hashtag enough is enough. It's right up there with Time's Up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But they are getting a bad rap in many ways because, I did feel somewhat at fault because I outed the Freemasonic corporate logos, and I was basically saying the very same thing. Hey, look, these guys wink and nudge each other, and they get the ride. It's no surprise that Starbucks is the top of coffee. If you know Masonic symbolism, of course it's going to be Starbucks, which, of course, again, has the fish goddess with the pentagram,
Sure.
And a very sensual position. These are all the same relationship. Like, I can go through every single corporate logo and identify the aspect of Masonic ritual that it represents, and then I can show you that corporate head inside the Masonic lodge. This is where my science came down to.
Mm-hmm.
But then suddenly, and I was actually quite excited when on one of David Icke's very first lectures, he used my corporate logo's artwork in his display, in his lecture, in one of his very first lectures. And I was thrilled to death, right? But it turns out David Icke had no idea who I am, or had done the homework that I had done on this, or even read my homework on. So he stuck a big eye in the pyramid over my corporate logo art and started talking about this Illuminati symbolism. And I have changed all of my titles on my website to say Illuminati symbolism. So, I may seem like a hypocrite, but this is due to algorithms. And this is due to Google searches, because nobody's going to Google Freemason logos.
Right.
The term now has become Illuminati. But that Illuminati is an ether. It's a ghost. It's a specter. What do you mean when you say the word Illuminati? And then who are these people that have these supernal powers to be able to predict 9/11 in the movie Back to the Future?
Sure.
Now, for me, that sort of scenario runs backwards, you see, because I already knew about the numbers 9/11 and their Luciferian connection. So when it shows up in the Matrix, or when it's somewhat alluded to in Back to the Future, to me, 9/11 was already an established symbol, back when 1990, when W was used it, or HW used it, or back to the works of Kenneth Grant, who was the acolyte of Aleister Crowley, and entire chapters dedicated on these numbers. So the fact that they would continue to use a symbol as 9/11, that makes sense. That's why it's on Neo's passport in the Matrix. Because it's a Luciferian symbol, and Neo is Lucifer. He says it. Everything is light. I mean, it's right there. So it's not a reference to the events of 9/11. 9/11 was simply another reference to 9/11.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's why the cornerstones were laid on 9/11, on both the Twin Towers and the Pentagon. This is already a symbol. So people are doing some conspiracy coincidence syndrome. And they're now misapplying the science and then have attached this to an organization that no longer exists.
Sure.
Because show me the Illuminati.
And
show it.
Have you ever considered that perhaps, though, if I can interrupt, do you ever consider that perhaps that's part of the agenda, is instead of putting all this flack on Freemasonry, let's put it on the nameless, faceless entity that has no accountability?
Now, there are definitely examples of that. To have Michael Jackson's brother and sister, after his death, LaToya and Jermaine, saying the Illuminati killed Michael Jackson. That's very bizarre. That's very public. And what do they mean when they say that? Or when Lady Gaga says, due to my connection with the Illuminati, these are her words, I now have demons that cause fibromyalgia in my body. And that's very bizarre. So here, or even Lady Gaga's Rolling Stone article, when she first was coming out. In Rolling Stone, she tells a tale of having a recurring dream of this young child strapped to a table, having her wrists slit while honey being poured into the wounds. This is in the Rolling Stone article. She tells the story that this was a recurring dream of hers, and that her mother said, that sounds like an Illuminati ritual. Now that is in Rolling Stone in black and white. So who are they talking about, right? So there are examples of this being promoted and projected. I have personally gone to see how Illuminati became the term, and I wanted to understand this. Why are we calling it that? Because the logos are not Illuminati. The Illuminati, you might see the Target logo as an Illuminati logo, the circumpunct point within a circle. Or you might see an owl as an Illuminati logo, Club of Rome, or some of those. But I think I got the Club of Rome there wrong. But anyway, so I tried to find out when this got injected into the conversation. And I found Myron Fagan in 1967, and I have this 3-record set titled Illuminati. And Myron Fagan in 1967, putting out what I would consider the very first podcast on vinyl, outlined who the Illuminati were. And he got to the Council on Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Globalism. All right? Now, if we were looking at a group that could coordinate such an effort as this, it would be the CFR and the RIAA. Bilderberg's Council on Foreign Relations. I mean, every single president has Council on Foreign Relations circling them like flies. You know what I mean? Every member of their cabinet is CFR. And we've shown this over and over and over again. So if there was an Illuminati, I think it would be the CFR. And if I were in England, I'd probably be talking about the Royal Institute of International Affairs. So Myron Fagan uses the term Illuminati, and he even clearly states that Adam Weishaupt's Illuminati became these organizations. So it's not a separation. It's not a term of endearment. He's saying it literally.
Well, you can even go back if you're like in Washington D.C. You go into or just outside of Washington D.C. at the Masonic Washington Memorial. You can go in there and read a letter that was sent to George Washington about the Illuminati infiltrating the United States at its inception. And Washington's response is, "Yeah, I couldn't be more happy about it." So I mean, there's definitely.
Well, I think he said of this. I don't think he said he was happy about it. I think he said of this, I'm quite sure. That he was certain the Illuminati had infiltrated.
I'm going to look that up, but yeah.
I'd have to go look at the quote again to be sure.
The point
That's
being,
just how my mind remembers.
Sure. The point being is that this is, since the inception of this nation, the Illuminati have had some at least notable mentions, if for lack of a better term. They've definitely had some involvement.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's like it's real easy.
But they only lasted 12 years from 1776.
Sure, and that's
the Illuminati themselves.
And that's what they want us to believe. And perhaps maybe that's true, but there's definitely would appear a reemergence, if you will. Maybe it's not directly related. Maybe it is. The point is that there seems to be a reemergence, and it's funny because it's really easy to look up. Any town USA, you can go and look up the Freemason headquarters, but how do you find the Illuminati? It's a faceless entity that has no accountability. Whereas if you go and point out point to the Freemasons every time, then they end up with these campaigns like "Enough is Enough," and
exactly.
Exactly,
but yet the proof is in the pudding, as they say. That for sure. Masons are in charge, man. So without a doubt, that's the case. But you can't really be anti-Mason and not be anti-America because all of the truth, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It all comes from Masonry, fraternity. Right. It comes from France and the French lodges, and from England, and of course, they established everything that everybody considers to be American. Mm-hmm. They were never Christian, This was not a Christian nation. It was a Freemason nation battling the Christians.
Exactly. In fact, that's why we left the old country. Was because we didn't want to be subjected to a pre-scripted religion.
Yeah. So think of the amount of effort it took LaFont and Washington to design pentagrams and owls in the street plans, and how complicated that has made.
Oh, come on, that's just crazy conspiracy talk. I'm sure that's all coincidental. Come on. But
and making the Pentagon a Pentagon, right. All of these things show that this is ritual magic, and that is one of the parts that people don't get into. Like, they're looking at the conspiracies, they're looking at all of this, that, and the other, but the ideas and the concepts of ritual magic are completely ignored because nobody knows or believes in such a thing. But you can see by the amount of effort that these people put into it that ritual magic is something that they believe very strongly in.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely some telltale signs in Washington, D.C. about that for sure. So let me ask you, when you say that you feel that you were like somewhat responsible, at least in part, behind this. Now, earlier you're saying like don't shoot the messenger. I mean, aren't you just kind of the messenger on this? And is it really? Can you really take responsibility for? Do you blame the guy that's saying, "Hey, this guy is robbing your house," or do you blame the guy that's robbing your house? I mean,
Right, but I had never said anything, honestly. I'm certain that a kindness AI could be attached to all of my work, and you would find that I've been absolutely kind to everyone.
Sure.
I hang out with Freemasons, Satanists, Jews, you name it, Muslims, Christians. I'm friends with them all. So I actually did not expect the witch hunt reaction when I presented this concept. And then I didn't expect it to become a mysticism that now is speaking of some omnipresent, omniscient entity that has the capability of putting things 20 years in the future into movies, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect what I saw in the reaction. Like, I had never said a bad word about Freemasons, or the occult.
So
right?
I can relate to that because I did the same thing with my book. I made it a point not to paint them in either a negative or a positive light because I didn't want to give them the impression I'm a pro-Mason or a anti-Mason. I just wanted to put the information in front of people so they could discern for themselves what to interpret from this.
Mm-hmm.
But I know where you're coming from, where it's like people just kind of grab it and run with it and kind of with their own agenda. And so that's my understanding is that's kind of what you're feeling as well.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I created a cult in a way. You know, I didn't mean to. And now I'm trying to rectify some of the truths that we're trying to give.
So what
you know, there's another side. Well, just understanding what these logos actually represent. You know, everybody's throwing out this, that, and the other, and just, you know, making it up as they go. And they say the Eye of the Pyramid, the Illuminati, when the Illuminati never used that logo. It's Masonry. You know, it's just all messed up. You know,
a little bit.
But now, what's really bizarre is when I got to the abyss and this BD symbolism, the OX mark of the beast, the satanic version. When I started seeing these pop up, this was only in the recent signs and symbols that are popping up. So all of a sudden, there was a very heavily satanic symbolism going on, yet no one was aware that these symbols were satanic. So it wasn't as if they were trying to make it so that everybody knew they were satanic. You know, they were secret Satan.
Right. Well, it would have quickly been rejected had people known what was really going on. So that, I mean, obviously, it has to be done under the guise of something else. And so let's make it into a Super Bowl halftime show, and then the people won't know that they're actually participating in our ritual.
Exactly.
So I guess.
So then, you know, that's part that's been left out of this puzzle altogether is the ritual magic aspect, because most people are afraid to research.
Yeah. So what would you have to bring that into the mix here? I mean, as far as like how would we bring that into the discussion that we're talking about, as far as what's important for people to be aware about that?
Well, I would say that talking about ritual magic is kind of the same as studying the results of somebody on LSD and then trying to describe it to people. Mm-hmm. Not doing the LSD yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's an interesting
you're
analogy.
Trying to take the experience of...
That's a good way to look at it.
Because you...
Go ahead.
Well, you can't really outline what occurs in ritual magic. You go and read Crowley's, you know, equinoxes and things of that nature, and you're just like, what? You know, it doesn't make any sense at all. And it takes a lot of study and a lot of information. You got to learn Hebrew and Greek. You know, right. It's not a simple thing, but it is absolutely the crux of the whole thing. And I think it's the one part of the puzzle that most people are ignoring, because either they're afraid to study the occult, or they just see the occult as something negative and don't want to deal with it.
And I think that's really the
thing. I don't see things that way.
It really is. I mean, it's one thing when you've been studying this stuff and you're surrounded, you kind of have a better grasp at it. But just to a random average person that's clueless on this stuff, these are really scary subjects to think about and discuss and explore. So I mean, it's been inherently it's been indoctrinated that we should fear certain words like occult which really it just means hidden from view. But people kind of now we want to equate just at the hearing of that word with, devil worship and magic. And the same thing applies with apocalypse, which really means an unveiling of knowledge. But people associate it with the end of the world, and it's like it's by design, just to keep us to fear these things and keep us from exploring these possibilities that maybe magic is real, and because if we don't know it's real and they do and they're the only ones using it, they got the upper hand in that. So
right. So the simplest definition of ritual magic is a change in consciousness occurring by will that makes something happen and cannot be described by modern science. So basically, magic is, anything. Making a work of art is magic, right?
sure.
But this type of ritual magic is the ability to bring your consciousness to a certain place, and then that conscious attitude causes the world to react without any, direct effort. And so magic is a lot of studying different mind states, meditation, different aspects of gods and archetypes, so that you can put yourself, you either invoke an entity or you evoke an entity. So you're either taking the God form in, or you're trying to create God form in front of you. And this is what ritual magic is about. And then what you find is the world suddenly changes because of what you did alone in this room with an altar. But at the same time, I kind of feel like a wizard right now that the Bell Illuminati commercial exists. I kind of feel like that was my fault.
Yeah. And that's easy to understand. I feel like I at least in some small way contributed to your cause, not that it was your cause, but I somehow contributed to the enough as well. But at the same time, I look at it maybe from a different perspective in that I'm just the messenger here. I'm just bringing this to your attention. But so it's been.
Yeah, I'm as shocked as anyone.
Yeah, it's definitely it's quite the rabbit hole. I'm still searching. After all these years, I've been exploring. I'm still trying to find the end. And it's nowhere in sight. We could go on for hours and hours, but I think we should probably wrap things up. We're already over time.
Well, I think you just made the biggest point there, Rob, is everybody that's saying, I know, you're a fanatic. Mm-hmm. And we should kill all fanatics. Right. No, that's a joke. If you kill all fanatics, then you're a fanatic, right? That's a joke. But, you're working in the fanaticism here if you're not going and getting the knowledge and understanding what exactly you're speaking on. And so you were very correct in that point that you don't know. And if you hold on to that, then you're open and you can learn. But these people that know, I know they don't know because I've put the homework in more than anyone into this Masonic order and into going to all the lodges. And I know that this information didn't exist in the public eye until, late 2000s. So, it's a very young science. So you can't go around saying, oh, I know this, I know that. Because there is not a shred of proof to say Walt Disney was a 33rd degree Mason, but you'll hear everyone say that they know that's true. Sure. There's not a hint of evidence. I've looked, they would be proud of him.
I think the evidence they look at, and see, that's the thing is people need to understand the difference between definitive proof and evidence, because evidence suggests something while definitive proof undeniably, it proves it. But I think the thing people really point at is the Club 33 in Disney World, which, again...
without a doubt.
I would say that's evidence, but not proof.
Without a doubt, Walt Disney Co. is Mason.
Sure.
Right? Without a doubt. They've got Hiram Abiff's tools on the roller coaster. You know what I mean? Sure. There's no hiding the fact that they're Mason. Sure. But Walt Disney himself, there's zero evidence.
Well, and it's hard to be a Mason when you're dead, too, so... once he's gone...
Well, we know for a fact.
Go ahead. Sorry.
We know for a fact that Roy Mason, or Roy Disney is a Mason. Mm-hmm. You can go down to the lodge in Florida. You can go see that. You can see Roy, his brother, was a Mason. You can see clearly that Walt was de Malay, one of the original 100 Knights of the Knights de Malay, which is the Mason's Boy Scout. Don't know, to the audience. So these things are proven. He was a Knight de Malay, one of the originals. Walt Disney was. His brother Roy was a Mason, and this is proven and known. And Walt Disney Co. is very Freemason.
Sure.
But there's no evidence to suggest that Walt was a Mason, or especially a 33rd. But yet everybody will say, I know. And so I'm just saying, go and do the homework before you say, I know.
Right. Well,
because it's this type of fanaticism that leads to enough is enough.
I was just going to say that's exactly the mentality and attitude that got us into the mess we call the world today, is to think we know it all when really we don't have a clue. It's been very enlightening. I want to leave you one last question. I was trying to think of the best question I could possibly ask you, and it's actually my girlfriend Melanie helped me come up with this one to close out the show. I just want to ask you, what is it, the most important thing that you think people need to know about Freemasonry?
Okay. Yeah, I did want to mention Jordan Maxwell's infamous words of, well, I've forgotten more than you will ever know. Mm-hmm. And I'm really beginning to understand that statement more and more. In 25 years of doing this, it's like, God, I've forgotten more than I. But luckily, thanks to the World Wide Web, everything I had to say has been documented.
And timestamped.
And realize Jordan Maxwell ended up poor, penniless, homeless, alone, and he changed the world. And this poor guy, I tried to get him to come live with me and rescue his Manly P. Hall library. Yeah. And the poor guy, here he is, the godfather of this very study we're discussing. Mm-hmm. And the poor guy's homeless and lonely and penniless and has no one to care for him. It's awful what happens to those that have brought us this knowledge, and they just get forgotten. And, the last thing Jordan Maxwell said to me was, well, the world's ending, but it's okay. I'm going to be dead anyway. My poor guy, man. And, of course, we couldn't get Jordan to move into our house. He didn't want to move from California to Kansas. And the library burnt to the ground. Somehow, the warehouse where it was stored. And these were irreplaceable, one-of-a-kind occult books that Manly P. Hall.
Kind of an echo of the Library of Alexandria, if you ask me.
Yeah, man. Oh, it hurts so much. It hurts to lose that library, and it hurts to have Jordan in the situation that he's in. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of it is because he was pre-World Wide Web. He didn't know how to work social networks. He didn't know how to work the web. He didn't know how to build a website. So somebody stole his name and stole his website. And, I'm just mentioning this now as the plight of a podcaster and a researcher, because you're entering this abyss. and just know that by the end, you're probably going to be like, well, I've forgotten more than I ever knew, and fuck it, I'm just going to die anyway. I'm sorry if I go. But, the poor guy. So anyway, I felt that was very important. And I also really feel like, I've forgotten most of what I've known. Or not most, but, I've forgotten more than you'll ever know, that's for sure. I mean, not you, but the listeners, it takes a lot of work to gain this knowledge. So the most important thing to take from Freemasonry is to understand its power to establish nature. That its ideas, now the Illuminati, their ideals, their tenets, are exactly what all the liberals are begging for. Free education, rights for women and homosexuals, all of that was in the tenets of the Illuminati, the press and the free press. And so everything that the liberals want is the Illuminati agenda. That you can clearly go look up the tenets of the Illuminati and see. And they also have an understanding of the cycles of civilization. A civilization is going to rise and going to fall. So, the goal here is to control history and make sure that the narrative fulfills the next part of the design. So we can see clearly we're in the narrative of freedom, liberty leads to tyranny, and that is the point of release the memo. And then we can clearly see that there is an organizational structure inside of everything, which is Freemasonry, which, like any tribe, they take care of their own. You know what I mean? So it's almost just a natural instinct of the tribesmen to take care of their own tribe. And this is why if you tell a police officer you're on the level and you do things by the square, they might let you go and not give you that ticket.
And this is why it's also funny to see them going after a president and bringing him down. But that we've already went over that. But just want to reiterate.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I don't have any knowledge of Bill Clinton being a Mason. There's nothing that I've seen to say that he was. Barack Obama, nothing to say except, well, there's a few instances in Barack's career where it did seem he was a Mason. George W. Bush, you saw him surrounded by Masons and aprons, and you already knew his Skull and Bones affiliation. And then, of course, Trump, there's no evidence to suggest he's a Freemason either. So, they've been selling off the lodges all over the country. And, for me, I think they're cashing out because they know that this is the next Gormungan, however you say that in Illuminati terms, this is the end of this nation. Bureaucracy is the final state before the collapse. So they're always...
The great work is nearly complete, is what you're saying? At least from their perspective?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, this New Atlantis experiment is ending, and the next is about to begin. And we should be completely aware of them, but then you also need to be aware of orders within orders and outside orders, Skull and Bones, Scroll and Key, Bar, Trilateral, Bilderberg. It's not, the Masons don't hold the keys to the kingdom. They don't. And most of them have no interest in ritual magic or anything. They join it because they want to be hanging out with men and get stitched up and like join and to get a good job.
Membership has its privileges.
Exactly. So, it's not like they're all a bunch of Satanists in there doing horrible rituals, although there are satanic rituals inside the Masonic Lodge. It's just most of them don't participate. It's an outside body that gets selected, and they do these things that, I have Masons on record stating these things, so I'm not just pulling these things out. You can go to freemantv.com and listen to it for yourself. I've interviewed all the Satanists, Masons, and everything I could possibly find in between, the wizards, the magicians, the sorcerers, even the MK Ultra. I've had them all, and I've spoken to them all, and there is no clear answer. But we need to realize that at the moment you're stating that then you're a fanatic, and you are part of the problem, and your reaction is the problem. And that's pretty much the most important thing I could say is get your homework done. Realize what you mean when you state something, and then state it clearly, because it's getting quite jumbled, and it's turning into a mysticism and a witch hunt.
Sure.
And nobody knows what's up anymore. And the key ingredient that I wanted to get through on your show was how young this science is. It is so young that the guy who created it is on your show. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's that young, guys. This is a brand new thing that we're just discovering. Yeah. And, we need to get deeper, and I hope everybody will take the methodology I've expressed here and apply it to come up with more data that is founded in fact.
Sure. And just like Jordan Maxwell, Freeman Fly is a pioneer in this young science, and I am greatly I have personal thank you I have to give you as well, just in that it wasn't until I came on your show that my work itself really took off. So I can't express to you enough my sincere debt of gratitude for what you did for me in bringing the Vitruvian Code to the people in your show, and for people like Jordan Maxwell. And it's whether you realize it or not, you are changing the world one mind at a time. And so I think that it's important to always remind yourself of that. And I think it's important to remind the people that, and Jordan Maxwell's a great example, that that it's a hard line of work, and the people listening, you need to support the people that you're studying, because it's tough. It's a tough lifestyle. And so when you listen to people like Freeman, subscribe to his page, go to his website and subscribe to his membership, and help support these people in this research, because that's what helps make it possible. So I think you kind of struck a nerve when you're talking about Jordan Maxwell with me, because it seems to be the case for a lot of us. It is a struggle just to bring this information, and it's a full-time job, and I think people just don't realize that. So remember to support your local conspiracy theorist. It's important.
Yes, absolutely. Most of them live in sheds.
Sure.
And, I started in a van. And, what this allows is the free time to study. And that's why we have this knowledge to share, and that's why I run Freeman's Home for Wayward Geniuses. I always have a genius in a room somewhere with a free house. Sure. Because if I have a house, I'm going to support other geniuses and keep them safe. And so, that's another way you can house these poor people. But every podcaster I know personally lives in a shed, and that is not an exaggeration. They literally live in sheds. And I ended up homeless 4 times doing this. I've never done it for the money, but trying to keep working without money is pretty hard.
That it is.
And, it has been a 13-year struggle to kind of establish the idea that maybe if everybody just tipped the podcast, this to me seems the simplest answer. Like, you listen to a podcast, it's awesome, here's $1. It's less than you give your barista. But, there's about 6,000 people listening. That's a good month's work right there. For $1, It's only $1 to you, but it's 6,000 for the podcast.
Yeah,
so don't be afraid to jump from here to the PayPal button and give $1, because it adds up. We're in that time of quantum dynamics, minimum input, maximum output, man. So,
and that's what it's all about. Is there anything? Obviously, we got to plug the freemantv.com, and of course, you're still doing the free zone every Saturday night. Is that still going on? Or?
Still doing the free zone.
Awesome.
Yeah, 13 years long, man.
Right on.
Longest running talk show on YouTube.
And here's to 13 more, hopefully.
Yeah.
Or the next 13.
You hear the trepidation in my voice. There has been so much work involved in doing this. There's so much things that I've had to learn to be able to do this. I mean, the list of software that I have conquered in order just to do this is ungodly. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It has been work.
I'm noticing that myself. You're like a one-man team, and so if you gotta not only master social skills, you gotta master this almost impossible to obtain knowledge. You have to master technologies. It's like you have to be. Yeah, it's like almost like people in our position are almost forced to become the new age Renaissance men, if you will. You have to,
absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else that we should plug for your cause here before we wrap it up?
I mean, I would love it if everybody went and watched Aliens from Hell, because to me this was the best PowerPoint ever crafted. Yeah, that's just on a PowerPoint standpoint, not even the content. The amount of work I put into this, and I don't get paid for any of this. It takes me months to create something like Aliens from Hell.
Sure.
And then I don't actually get paid to perform it. I get gas money, but I got free places to stay. But everything I've done just because I felt like it was what I was supposed to do.
And
so I would love it if everybody went and watched Aliens from Hell. But it's blocked worldwide on YouTube. So the only way to watch it is to go to freemantv.com.
Well, there you go. That's where people should check out next as soon as we wrap up this program. It's been a very insightful and interesting hour and more. We went a little bit over budget, but that's great because that's just evidence that what we're talking about is captivating, and there's a lot to be said and needs to be said. So we've said it, and again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been interesting, and tell everybody make sure to tune in next week. We'll have Court Lindahl here. We're going to be talking about the mysteries of Oak Island and more. And otherwise, I'll see you next week. Thanks again, Freeman.
Thank you.